Okay, we are started the video because I almost forgot. I haven't covered my head this morning. Okay, well, we are beginning two chapters regarding the measurement of the third temple, Ezekiel's vision of the third temple. And the rabbis admit even that these are very difficult chapters. A lot of the meaning of the words, the Hebrew sometimes is obscure. There's a lot of different opinions by different rabbis and scholars. And I'm sure even in the Christian world, there's lots of opinions about that as well. So the most interesting thing to me, before I get into the questions, I'll do something different. If you read the two chapters this week, I just want to ask, this is just your opinion, what stood out to you as probably one of the most significant or interesting aspects of these two chapters, 40 and 41 of Ezekiel? Anybody? Yes?
Just the explicit nature and the precision of everything given. It's like, wow, I wish we could have an architectural visual for this. Because
Well, there is diagrams, but again, even though it's very specific, like you said, the words are obscure. And so it's hard to determine what is the translation exactly of a cubit or this or that. And so there's difference of opinion.
Yeah, 18 inches, 21 inches.
Well, yeah, it doesn't say inches, so
But
right.
it translated that.
Right, exactly. So, well, it's even more than that. The cubit is the easy part, but there's a lot more to it. But Ed, what was significant to you?
What was significant to me is that it transcended measurements. That it was going deeper than the measurement as it was being explained, through the commentary I was reading.
Okay.
More figurative and mystical.
Yeah. Okay.
Meaning that the temple is within us, and the whole world will be that church.
Okay. I guess too, that's another aspect of it. It depends on the commentary that you're reading too. There is different scholars of opinions, and so that particular commentary you were reading, that approach, a mystical interpretation. There's lots of different interpretations, strategies of interpretation. And probably what you were getting into is what in the Jewish world we call sod, or a type of mystical type way of interpreting scripture. Anyone else have an opinion about what stood out, Becky?
It's very elaborate.
Yes.
And huge.
Yep.
And it's kind of big.
Yeah. Well, I'll give, okay.
Just to mention this, like she said, I looked up the cubic piece in 18 inches and then 25 inches, and it's just all over the place.
Elaborate.
The sizes and different intricacies.
Yeah.
It was just
Detail.
Yeah.
Would you say?
Very,
Yeah.
And the one thing that struck me too is when they were talking about the stories, that they got bigger as they went up, and I'm like, I just like, how does that work? If there's a foundation here and then it's expanding as it goes up. So I'm like,
It's like these measurements took over the whole world, and it's impossible for this building to be this, cover this breadth of area, like thousands of miles. Yeah. Okay, that's how far away. I'm talking about Bill.
Okay.
And he was talking about Luther, getting into the German aspects of the mile, and that mile is like 8 of our miles. And
Well, see, that's a whole different opinion right there. So, I didn't, my commentaries that I studied didn't get into that. So that's very interesting how a German interpretation would be a lot different, There is a lot, just before we get into all this, there is a lot of difference of interpretation, opinion, and that's why there's so many different theological application to this. People come up with different theology, but I just want to say what was significant to me, and the rabbis asked this question, is if you think about it, Ezekiel's vision was given about what time period, about in Israel's history? When was this happening?
573.
Okay, yeah, and it was Babylonian exile. So the first temple had been destroyed, right?
Right.
But everyone refers to this as the vision of the third temple. So if you think about it, the second temple hadn't even been built yet, right?
Right.
So why, I'm not asking, I mean, this is just an interesting question. I don't necessarily looking for an answer. But why wouldn't, when the Jews returned from Babylon, use this as the blueprint for the second temple? They didn't. They didn't. So that's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
To me, that was what was most significant to me. And yet, this is seen as a prophetic blueprint for what is to come. So that's interesting.
I have a question.
Yes.
Was there a blueprint for the second temple in the scripture?
Well, it was based, the rabbis say it was based more on Solomon's temple. It was based as more of the pattern of what the first temple. In fact, there's scripture that even alludes to it that says the people that saw the first temple when they returned from Babylon, there were people that had lived during the first temple, and that when they saw the second temple, they actually, or not even the whole second temple, but as it was being built, they were weeping because it was the glory of the second temple was nothing compared to the glory of the first temple. Yeah, and so they were weeping for sadness in that regard. So it was patterned after it, but it wasn't nearly as glorious as Solomon's temple.
No, he's talking about the Zerubbabel temple, not the one that Herod like later.
Yeah, very good point. Herod later comes back, and he just before the first century, and he beautifies the second temple. All right, and that's why it's called Herod's temple, but it's not really a third temple. It's a beautification of the second temple. The second temple was pretty much just plain, just real, just basic, patterned after the first.
And when was it built? I can't remember.
70, well, they started after the 70-year exile, so around that time period. Sacrifices actually began before that. You don't need a temple to do sacrifices. All you need is an altar. So but let's get into the questions now and start looking at this. But I wanted to get that thought into your mind that even though this vision was given for the second temple, interestingly, was not the pattern for the second temple. Very interesting. All right. In the 25th year of our exile, in the beginning of the year, in the 10th day of the month, in the 14th year after the city was struck down on that very day. What is significant of these dates given in verse 1? Explain them and put it into context on the, quote, very day that Ezekiel was given this vision. And what is the vision about? What is this vision concerning? So, who'd like to tackle that?
This, the beginning of the year for the Jewish people had two beginnings. One was Tishri, which was in September, and the other was Nisan. Nisan. Nisan is in this complicated view more relevant in that it had a view towards Christ and the Passover, and even going into the Jubilee.
Okay.
And I thought that was the significance of
Well, Jubilee, though, if you're gonna tie it to Jubilee, that happens in the fall.
to
Tishri, right?
Tishri, yeah.
And
Yeah.
at this time, though, they didn't call it Tishri. They had a different name for the months. The names of the months on today's Hebrew calendar are actually based off of pagan gods' names, like Tammuz and some of the other names. So it had a Babylonian influence. Nevertheless, it was in the 10th day of the 7th month, if you're tying it to Jubilee. Like I said, there's different opinions. And what day is that? 10th day of the 7th month. The Atonement. Yom Kippur. And this is a Yom Kippur. How many years after the destruction? Okay. Yeah. Well, 14th year after the city was conquered. Yeah, the exile began 25 years before, but it was 14 years after the city was conquered and leveled. So 14 years had gone by, and on this Yom Kippur, on the very day, 10th day of the 7th month, if, of course, you prescribe to the interpretation. Now, the
Another interpretation.
Yeah, what would go ahead and give the other
It
one?
would be the 10th of Nisan.
The Nisan, which is a significant day.
That's right.
That's the day you choose the lamb
Yeah.
and bring it into your house, and then hold it for 4 days, and then on the 14th you slaughter it at sundown. So
And then that was the day Yeshua entered Jerusalem. Yeah.
there's parallels between fall feasts and the spring feasts. It's like if you look at a clock and you have 6 o'clock, and that would be, let's say, the 7th month, and then you take the arms and you go up to the 12th hour, and that would be the spring, the 1st of Nisan. And so it's the polar opposites, but they're equal, if you will. They have the similar,
So those are two different equinoxes.
Yeah.
Could it be referring to both then? Possibly.
well, that's why there's so much confusion, you know. But he says at the beginning of the year, that would lead you to a Nisan interpretation. But then he talks about that 10th day, and what else does he say here? The 10th of the month is significant, and Yom Kippur, I would say, is a little bit more significant than the 10th of Nisan, even though the 10th of Nisan has some significance. It's not necessarily a Shabbat. It's just a day of preparation. It's a day that the lamb was set aside for the Passover. So you can see why there's difference of opinions here. And I'd say both are kind of legitimate and could be argued. All right. We don't know for sure. Now, the rest of this question is, well, what is this vision about? Well, it's a little bit obvious. What is the vision about? Temple, right?
Building of the temple.
Yeah. Which kind of leads more of a Yom Kippur argument. Because what happens on Yom Kippur? Day of Atonement. What happens? Very special. Not at no other time all year. What happens on the Day of Atonement? Hello. Huh? Yeah, concerning the temple.
Oh, the high priest enters the holy of holies.
Oh, that's right.
Ah. So if the vision is about the temple and the timing of that, it kind of argues towards a Yom Kippur date, which would make sense. Again, it's speculative. But if you add up, it's like we're like detectives. We're looking for clues. And the clues add up to a logical conclusion, right? It doesn't, not every court case that's argued is absolutely proven. It's proven beyond a shadow of a doubt with as much evidence as you can get, but you're not supposed to have any shadow of a doubt. But sometimes we have a lawyer here, and he could attest to that. You get as much evidence as you can to argue your point and to prove your point. So that's what these different scholars are like. They're like lawyers arguing their point.
My case, if I were a lawyer, would gravitate towards the Christian view of this. This is a temple. It's not John's temple, that he saw in the Revelation.
Okay.
It's not that. And it's not the first or the second. And so this is a third temple, and it's also what time period is that temple going to be built? I think it's going to be. It seems like it's built in the millennial period, when bringing together of Jews and Gentiles, and I think this is what Ezekiel was seeing when he was brought up, and he saw this happening. The bringing together bigger than it was, because this was a time that God actually stated that this would not be a temple that kings would be buried under, make a harlotry of the temple. The two temples were destroyed, right? And these temples were destroyed for a reason, you know. It compares it to the statue that Nebuchadnezzar saw in Daniel, gave a picture of the clay feet and the iron and how that would be destroyed by this rock, which would be Christ. I think it's a vision towards Christ and his eventual coming, for a real,
Well, you, just so you know, that as putting yourself in that lawyer's position in arguing your case, you will have other lawyers who would argue against you. So if you're going to do that, you got to get your ducks in a row. Like Marty would say, probably when you argue a case, you got to have your points. You got to have solid evidence, and you got to be able to point it. And I can tell you that there's a lot of scholars out there that would argue against that. Not that they would argue against it pointing to Yeshua, but that they would say as well as this is a literal temple that is yet to come, and they will give evidence to prove it. So it's part of an argument. It's not. Let's go on. So I think we covered number one.
A hung jury.
Yeah, a hung jury. Okay. All right. Oh boy. Well, you can always appeal. All right. Second question. Explain what is a cubit and how many cubits is the measuring rod in the man's hand? What is a cubit and how many cubits?
Part of question one.
Oh, second part of question one? Oh, what's the vision concerning and about? Or no? Did I miss? Explain.
About the context on the very day.
Yeah, I meant that was the discussion of which day. And that very day, what is that very day? And we kind of said it was either Yom Kippur or maybe the 10th of Nisan. That's what I was looking for.
Oh, okay.
Is there something else?
No, then never mind.
Okay. So we think we agree the vision is about the temple, right? Now, what the temple is pointing us to, that's a whole nother question. Let's go look at number 2. Explain what is a cubit and how many cubits is the measuring rod in the man's hand? Now, again, there's different opinions, but what is a cubit?
1 foot 6 inches.
You say it's 1 foot 6 inches?
The length of a man's forearm, something like that.
Okay. Becky?
Well, I had in my notes that the cubit, it's about, like she said, about a foot and a half, but then if you put the hand breadth, it's about, yeah, if you round it off, about 21 inches altogether.
21 inches?
Mm-hmm. It's including the hand breadth. The hand breadth is 19.
Yeah.
So, roughly, I think one scholar had 20.679, so
Right.
if you round it off, it's in our terms about 21 inches.
Man's hands longer than 2 inches. That is perfect.
They're small.
I thought it was 2 cubits,
That's 2 inches.
There's a large one and a
Yeah,
small
so
one.
What do some of the scholars say? Some of the commentaries that you looked at.
Well,
Because it says it right in the text, in the brackets, 7.5 feet is 6 cubits. A hand breadth is 3 inches. Because maybe a hand breadth is half of a hand or a third or something, we don't know.
But breadth, are you talking about the width of the
I don't know.
Palm.
That's only 3 inches.
Yeah, but it could be half of it.
So how long is the measuring rod?
6 cubits.
6 cubits. Yes.
It would be 9 feet. My math is right.
Okay.
1.5 times 6.
All right. Okay. So Rashi measures it this way. Of 6 cubits each, a cubit being a cubit and a handbreadth. Scripture speaks of 2 different sizes of amot, or cubits. One of 5 which is called tifchim, or handbreadths. It talks of another cubit, which is of 6. Okay, and its height is 1 rod, is measured the wall to be 6 cubits high. The text implies that the wall was of the same height on all 4 sides. However, Rashi, based on a tractate called Midos 2:4, explains that the measurement of 1 rod was true only in the eastern part of the outermost wall of the temple complex. The other 3 sides were much higher. The eastern wall was lower than the others in order not to block the line of sight of the Kohen sprinkling the blood of the para aduma, which is the red cow, in the direction of the temple while standing on the Har Hazatim, which is the Mount of Olives, to the east of the temple. So you almost have to really go into some rabbinic discussion, because there's a lot of details, according to Jewish tradition, that Christian scholars may. Now, Gill looks at that. Gill's a good one. But some of these Christian scholars, they don't take into consideration there's actually 2 different measurements of cubits, 5 and a 6, plus the handbreadths. So something to keep in mind, on the outside of the temple, Rashi says, which is really about chapter 45 as well, describes a portion of the land to be set aside as a sacred portion for God to the north of the city, and in its exact center lies an area of land measuring 500 rods by 500 rods, and that is to be called Har Habayit, which is the Temple Mount. At 6 cubits to the rod, this yields an area of a 9 million square cubits. By contrast, the Temple Mount of the Second Temple was only 500 cubits by 500 cubits, or 250,000 square cubits, as recorded in Midos 2:1. So again, it is bigger, much bigger, but that's just kind of giving you a little bit of background on that. Any other opinions about that question? Cubit, what is a cubit, or how big is the measuring rod? Yeah.
I was going to say in our PLB, it says there's a note at the bottom that says about 10 feet.
Mm-hmm. About. Keep that in mind. About. Verse 6 says, then he went up to the gate that faced east, went up its steps. When he measured the threshold of the gate, it was 1 rod wide. Also the other threshold, 1 rod wide. Explain the gate that faced east. What was unique about it, and what was similar about it compared to the Second Temple in the past? The gate that faced east. Explain it.
The gate that faced east had water running, or a river running from it.
Okay, you're talking about the vision, I think, in Zechariah. Is that what you're discussing? Is that in our text? Is that in our chapter? Okay.
Oh, it's in another chapter.
Okay. Okay.
But,
So you're referring to another. Okay. Go ahead.
I mean, I thought that was the entrance that was shut closed, because that was the entrance where God entered. It was
Okay.
kept closed, yeah.
That exists to this day.
Yeah.
And that's a gate on the old city, the eastern gate. That actually exists to this day. And I don't know if, I wouldn't personally say it's the same. Again, this is all speculative. But the gate of the temple, the third temple, would be part of the actual courtyard. Whereas what you're talking about is the gate, the walls of the old city, which in the 1400s was walled up by, I think it was Suleiman, who was a Arab, he was the, what's that empire? My mind is scattered. You guys are going to have to help me. Suleiman was the
You're not Ottoman.
Turk Ottoman, I think, the Ottoman Empire, yeah. And they walled up that eastern gate. That's there to this day. You can see that. This is the actual gate of the temple courtyard itself. So I think it's two different things. Bonnie?
That's the gate that Yeshua is supposed to come through. They walled it up.
Well, that's there to this
Cemetery
day.
in front of it, so
Yeah.
that people can walk on.
Right, and right in front of it is a cemetery.
Yeah.
The Arabs put, I think Yasser Arafat might even be
It's
buried
almost
there.
like they believe too, that he's gonna come through
Well,
there and try
yeah.
to prevent it.
Yeah, that's what people say. I don't think in their minds that's what they're doing it for. Go ahead, Jackie.
Okay, well, this is Gil. He said the eastern gate of the outward court,
Mm-hmm.
so it's the gate facing the east, or the eastern gate
The
of
court.
the outward court.
Not the city gate.
No, not the
The
city.
court
but
of the temple.
Of the
So
temple,
we're
yeah.
talking two
And
different
then-
things.
Then he went on to say it's symbolic of Yeshua, who is the door, the way, or the gate.
Okay.
And the outward court, which led into an inner court,
Right.
and then it goes straight on to the Holy of Holies.
Correct.
That's what Gil said.
And since it's east, the city gate, the one that they're talking about, would be facing that too, going outward towards the city gate. So its eastern gate is eastern gate, whether it's the courtyard gate or the city gate, they're both east, right? So that leads directly into the Holy of Holies, eventually. All right? That's why that eastern gate is so important. So, anything else unique about it? Rashi says the gate that faced eastward is where you enter the Temple Mount compound and you come to the gate of the women's courtyard. Rashi's use of the second temple term, women's courtyard, is justified because Ezekiel's outer courtyard had the same status in halacha, or Jewish law, as the women's courtyard. For information on that, they refer you to a commentary, Kelim 1:8, for a delineation of the various levels of sanctity applied within the temple area. However, the outer courtyard of Ezekiel's temple is built quite differently from the women's courtyard of the second temple. The women's courtyard was 135 square cubits area. It lay in front of the Azara, equivalent to the inner courtyard of Ezekiel. It did not surround it. In contrast, the other courtyard of Ezekiel measured 312 cubits by 317 cubits. And so what they're saying there, it's unique. It's not exactly like the second temple. And it isn't called the women's courtyard. And you went up these steps. Rashi quotes that tract that I mentioned before, Midos 2:3, that there were 12 steps leading up to the women's courtyard in the second temple. These steps will be in Ezekiel's temple also. And he measured the doorpost of the gate, and the other doorpost. The two ends of the wall that framed the gateway were the doorposts for the 50-cubit high doors that led into the outer courtyard. The thickness of the wall was 1 rod, or 6 cubits. Okay, and then it goes on to talk about its pillars, which I think we talk about next in the next question. So there is some uniqueness to this part of the temple at the eastern gate. It's not exactly like the second temple, and it's not called the women's courtyard. But halakhically, the rabbis say that it has the same status. In the second temple, there was a courtyard for Gentiles. There was a courtyard for women. Now, women, it's not a discriminatory thing. It's not that women are less, spiritually qualified to enter the presence of God, but women have issues that every month that they can't go in any further if they were to. So have the court of the women. Even men can only go so far. And then even the Kohanim, the priests, can only go so far. And then there's the one chamber where only one priest can go, ever. And then only once a year. So.
This is off topic, but there's something that I've heard and read that it said that men with mutilated
Yes.
genitals could not
Go in the temple.
But they couldn't be a part of the assembly. Does that mean they couldn't be part of the assembly of Jews? They can't.
No, it doesn't mean they're not part of the community. It means that they can't go into the temple, in the courtyards. They can't offer the sacrifices.
So they can't go to service or anything?
They could go to a synagogue. They could not go
okay.
into the temple.
Okay.
There's only one temple. There's all kinds of little synagogues all over the place. Okay?
But why does the rabbi say that they are defiled? It's something that's not their fault.
It's not exactly their fault. Like a woman who has a menstrual cycle, it's not their fault. It's a status of impurity or a status of some kind of imperfection physically. You know, if one of your eyes is gorged out, which is the same reason none of the lamb can be blemished. It's a blemish, like a physical blemish, which disqualifies a person from going into, and women experience that impurity, so it prevents them from being completely clean. It's not about sin or you did anything bad or anything like that. It's just a level of sanctity. Is that understood?
Offering.
In approaching God in His presence, in worship in the temple, God Himself in the Torah laid down these. Who can approach me in this courtyard? Who can approach me in this courtyard? And who can come into the inner sanctuary where my actual presence is located above the Ark of the Covenant? Who can actually approach? Not everybody.
Is it true that they used to have a rope tied around them?
That's in Jewish. That's more folklore and Jewish rabbinical commentary. There is some evidence that might have happened.
Is that Talmudic?
Yeah.
I kind of got the impression that those disqualifying events, as you said, were not, or conditions, I should say, not punishment,
Right.
but are trying to not put undue pressure on people who already have some problem to deal with, and not make them be responsible to be in the Holy of Holies.
Yeah, you can make that argument. That sounds very rabbinical. Yeah.
There's gotta be a compassionate viewpoint.
I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
You know, I know that they have plans and blueprints already. If
Yeah.
the Temple Institute, so what model are they using?
I do believe they're using Ezekiel's third temple, which is
Yeah.
Rashi's interpretation of it. I do believe. When I went there, I seem to remember it that. You can go to Jerusalem today, and there's a museum that Dahlia's talking about called the Temple Institute. And when you go in, they have all the furniture replicated and according to Torah and rabbinic interpretation. And so that the hand washing laver is there that's going to be used in the third temple. They even have the menorah that will be in the inner sanctuary of the third temple. They have it there. It's kosher. They have the table of showbread. The shulchan is there. You can see it. And they even have men who are priests who are practicing the rituals. And even on front cover of a Jewish newspaper that I subscribe to, not the local Jewish newspaper, that's too liberal, but an Orthodox newspaper that I get, they showed pictures, live pictures, photographs of the Kohanim today that are there in Jerusalem practicing the rituals and how they're done.
Yeah, I understand they have red cover already too.
So,
Have they squirreled away gold for all the stuff that's needed? Wow.
But they're not doing sacrifices.
no, they're practicing certain rituals such as like the Omer offering, Mincha offerings. They are burning grain. But again, it's not being offered to the Lord. It's just halakhically rabbis have given it a certain disposition that allows them to do it because there's only one place where you can offer sacrifices. And that one place, Jews are forbidden to even pray on to this day. And that's the top of Temple Mount. You know where the wall is, where Jews go to the Wailing Wall, which is we call a kotel. Above that is where the temple is to be. And there's a mosque there, and the Arabs control that, and that is the only place sacrifices can be offered to the Lord. That's why there's this, if the Jews tried to go up there and even pray, there would be chaos, there'd be war, okay? So these priests today, what they're doing is they're not really offering sacrifices. They are just practicing the rituals. And so they've proclaimed it, they've given it a certain status so that there's no confusion. We're not offering this to the Lord, we're just practicing. And so they've sanctioned that. They've allowed that to happen. That makes sense? We're getting off track, but let's get back into this. It's quite fascinating though. This is all fascinating. Number 4, explain the symbolic meaning of the pillars. What do they have to do with terebinths and oak, and why? The pillars. Explain the pillars. What are the pillars? Pillars of what? What are we talking about here? Eastern gate. Okay, these are the pillars that stood in the doorway on both sides of the eastern gate. And it says terebinths and oak. So
Were they like columns?
columns, yeah, pillars, yeah. So
The only thing I got with the terrapin is the tree that grows in Israel, and it's like an old tree that's strong, it's very.
yes. Text talks about them being like, beginning in verse 14, I believe, talks about terebinths and oak. Where is it? I'm trying to find it. Okay. Okay. This was commentary. Maybe that's why you didn't get this. Okay. The answer really is in the pillars. And its pillars, Eliav, where the pillars were called Elim, because in appearance they were similar to Elah and Elom, which is elm and oak. And so a reference to this would be in Isaiah 6:13. So if you look, let's look at Isaiah 6, verse 13. Someone read Isaiah 6:13.
For from the least to the greatest, all of them are greedy for gain. And from prophet either to Cohen, everyone practices deceit.
Isaiah 6.
Oh, I'm sorry. I hit
Okay.
wrong.
All right.
For if even a tenth of the people remain, it will again be devoured. But like a pistachio tree or an oak whose trunk remains alive after leaves fall off, the holy seed will be its trunk.
So that's a reference to Israel. When God cuts down Israel, Yeshua said, behold, the axe is already at the tree, it's already at the root. But when God cuts Israel down, it still has a stump, there's still a remnant.
Mhm.
And so the temples were destroyed, the first and second temple, but there's still a stump, there's still a remnant, and it will come back. And so the same Rashi comments on Isaiah 6. He says, and when there is yet a tenth, what is a tenth? A tithe. Okay. When there is yet a tenth, and when they are diminished to 1 out of 10, according to Rashi, even upon this remnant will I return my hand as a purge after a purge, and it will be purged until only completely righteous men will remain, who will repent wholeheartedly. Like a terebinth and like an oak, which at the time of their casting, when they cast off their leaves during the fall, one casting off another, another casting until nothing is left in it except the trunk, they too, the holy seed, found in its midst, adhering to their holiness, they will be to me as the trunk. Another explanation is matzvatah is its planting. Therefore I will not destroy them, for I planted them as a holy seed. Some explain that there is a Shalachet gate in Jerusalem, as stated in Ezra and in 1 Chronicles 26:16, written by Ezra, and there terebinths and oaks were planted. So the commentators, the Jewish commentators, are saying that these pillars are a reminder of the oaks and the terebinths. So, and just as the temples were destroyed, there was a remnant. Okay, that was a difficult question.
When I hear the two pillars, I'm thinking of the ones in Solomon's temple.
Yes.
Yeah.
But he named Yachin and Boaz.
There you go.
Which definitely you can from their name.
I couldn't remember their names.
Signify Mashiach, in my opinion.
Yeah, because Boaz was the
Right.
forefather.
And the first one, Yachin, means the one who will prepare, like in his first one. And then Boaz, when he comes in his full, yeah.
Mashiach. Pillar. That's interesting.
Is it Yahim or
Yachin.
Noon at the end. Very good. Number 5. What is problematic with the
This
translation?
is in 1 Kings 7:41.
You guys might want to take note of that. 1 Kings 7:41. Study that on your own. Number 5. What is problematic with the translation of verse 15? And how is the gate size compared with the second temple previously? How is Pnei Hasha'ar translated here? The translation of verse 15. Anybody catch that? You might have had to look at multiple translations of the text to find out what the difference is. The TLV says, now from the front of the gate. What does other translations say? Does anyone have a different translation than the TLV? Does everyone's Bible read the same? Is there no other translation?
I can find
Okay. If you have an electronic device, you can look up.
Which verse?
It's verse 15 of Ezekiel 40. But if you have a King James or if you have something else.
The voice.
The what?
The voice.
The voice? Verse 15 of.
That's the name of the Bible.
Okay. Now I'm asking, what does the text say in verse 15?
the measurement from the outer courtyard gate entrance to the farthest end of the outer courtyard at the inner portico of the inner east gate was 87.5.
Okay, so it says the measurement. That's interesting. Notice the TLV says the face.
The face?
Yeah.
Wow, this says the distance along the fence.
Okay, yours says distance. Hers said measurement. This Orthodox translation says the height of the entry gate.
King James, and from the face of the gate of the entrance unto the face of the porch of the inner gate was 50 cubits.
Okay, so King James says height, right? Pnei Hasha'ar literally means height or face. It can mean the face.
It says the face of the king. Face.
Oh, I thought you said it said the height.
No,
That's
face.
the name.
Okay, face. All right. So the TLV here is faithful to the King James translation of the Hebrew here. And the Hebrew has Hebrew can do that. Hebrew can have, well, English can do that too. It has more than one meaning. So are we talking about the height or are we just talking about the face? Or both?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so different translations translate it differently. So there's a problem. And so how is the size of this gate compared with the previous temple? Is it larger? Is it smaller? Is it exactly the same? We didn't go that far, did we? Nobody got
I would
that.
assume it would be larger. I mean,
Okay, so far everything else has been
Everything is,
larger,
yeah.
right?
It better be.
That's a good guess.
I think it's the same.
You think it's the
From what I
same?
gathered, yeah.
Well, what do you have anything to
Let
substantiate
me
that?
see. The width, where did I put that? I got it from, it wasn't Gil. Width of the outer courtyard to the exterior of the gate of the inner court was 100 cubits. And that's comparable to the second temple.
Okay, very good. So we have disagreement. Two lawyers are arguing the case. One has more evidence than the other. Very good. So Rashi interprets this Pnei Hasha'ar as the height of the gate is derived from the height of all the other gates mentioned in this description, which is 50 cubits. Now that's talking about the other gates of this temple. All right. Rashi refers to verse 25 and verse 36. The word length is, and understands orech as height and not the usual meaning of length. Radak, which is another rabbi, by rejecting Rashi's interpretations of the Hebrew word al as height and of orech as height, asserts that nowhere in the entire description is there any mention of a height of 50 cubits for any gates. The gates of the second temple were 20 cubits, according to Midos 2:3. Radak questions why the gates of Ezekiel's third temple should be any different. Some rabbis say it is different. Some say it's the same. Barbanel and Tos, Yom Tov, discuss this difficulty, but conclude that Rashi's explanation of the verse is more acceptable than any of the alternatives. Thus, the translation follows Rashi, who interprets this verse to mean that both the outer gate and the inner gate were 50 cubits high. So there is some dissidence. But Rashi seems to be authoritative on the interpretation of the third temple. Number 6, what is the meaning of shuttered windows? This was fascinating to me. What is the meaning of shuttered windows in the gate in verse 16? What were they used for? And why is their description strange?
Shuttered means that there are curtains or lattices.
Well, lattices, but not exactly the way we would think of it today, like screens, like blinds or something. They're not shuttered in that way. What do you say?
When I lived in the islands, their homes had those paneled like windows. They were like, and you could, yes, that's it, like and you could let the light in just a little bit.
Now you're getting onto it.
And it was different because there was no light at all or no windows at all in the tabernacle or Solomon's temple.
Right.
But this was because
here there's windows. And they're shuttered.
Bill said they were like little holes or whatever you could see dribble that light in. Lattice windows with small little holes or just to let the light in.
Yes, exactly. I think Gil's onto it. Well, Gil studies the rabbinic, so what they look like when they're called shuttered. So you have a wall here, and the opening of the window would be maybe like this big, okay? But on the other side, it was only this big. So when it says shuttered, it was like a funnel. From the outside, it was large, but it narrowed as you went. Remember, it was a whole cubit. The width of the wall was at least one whole cubit, I think, not a rod. A cubit. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it was a rod. I can't remember. I'd have to go back and look. It was quite a thick wall. But the wall's window on the outside was larger than the opening on the inside. So it's strange. Kind of a strange description. I've got a picture of it here. Before I maybe show you the picture, it says in one rabbinic commentary, Yalkut Shimoni comments on 1 Kings 6:4. and explains the reason for this strange structure. One would expect narrowing windows to be wider towards the inside so that the incoming sunlight would spread as far as possible in the dark interior. The design of these windows, however, symbolized that the temple needed no light from the outside. On the contrary, the outside world would require the spiritual light that emanated from the temple. Therefore, the windows widened towards the outside. The windows were placed in several locations. That is interesting. I mean, isn't that fascinating? So here, Ezekiel's getting this vision of wider windows on the outside, but narrowed on the inside, which would make no sense from a normal human logical. When we make windows in our house, we make them big to let in the light. And this was made big on the outside to let out the spiritual light. Isn't that interesting? So here's a picture of what it looked like, according to rabbinic interpretation. See that? I'll come around. See, ladies? See right there? On the right above where I highlighted.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah. Narrow. Yeah, you would think. You know what it reminded me of? Wizard of Oz. When they come to the city of Oz and there's that gate, that little window, and the little wizard guy. Remember that scene? The Wizard of Oz? I mean, that's not a good comparison. Follow the yellow brick road.
So the light that's.
The light on the inside of the temple is shining out brighter. This is a commentary, an Orthodox Jewish commentary. Did I show you this? Did I show you that?
Yeah.
All right. So, shuttered windows. That was that. Number 7, in verse 19, we're told that the width of the outer courtyard to the exterior of the gate, the inner, was 100 cubits. How does this compare with the second temple? Same question. Is it the same? Is it different? The same again? Do you have anything to back it up?
Well, I didn't get it from Gil. There was another commentator.
This is that same courtyard we talked about before, about the women's courtyard. Halakhically, or according to Jewish law, it has the same purpose as the women's, equivalent, the women's courtyard. But my question is, we're told that the width of the outer courtyard, the width of it, going all the way to the exterior gate of the inner, was 100 cubits. Is that the same or different?
We're comparing it to the
Second temple.
It's gotta be larger, because everything else is
Okay. Another guess with no evidence. A guess. Lawyers making an argument.
But everyone disagrees.
True. That's what makes Bible study so fun. All right. I'll give you the authoritative answer here. In contrast to the second temple, okay, the word contrast means different, okay, in which the women's courtyard was in front of the Azara, but did not surround it. The outer courtyard, which is in Ezekiel's temple, is halakhically equivalent to the women's courtyard. And it did surround the inner courtyard on all 4 sides. This verse describes the width of the outer courtyard. The walls of their inner courtyard were 100 cubits removed from the eastern, southern, and northern walls of the outer courtyard. Tosafot Yom Tov explains that according to this verse, the width of the outer courtyard was 312 cubits. The distances from the northern and southern walls to the inner courtyard were each 100 cubits. And the inner courtyard itself was 100 cubits. for a total of 300 cubits of floor space. The thickness of the walls of the inner courtyard, although not specified in the text, is assumed to be 6 cubits, as were the walls of the outer courtyard. The gateway of the eastern wall surrounding the outer courtyard is called Sha'ar HaTachtonah, relative to the gate of the inner court, because it was on a lower part of the mountain's slope. One had to climb 8 steps to reach the gate of the inner courtyard. In the second temple, there were 15 steps between the women's courtyard and the inner courtyard. So the rabbis say, halakhically, they had the same purpose, but the size was significantly different. Okay. Yeah.
As we're talking, I'm looking at John Gill. He says we're making a big mistake by trying to analyze this as a physical structure. But this is
That's a typical Christian.
It says that Christian, what's that?
He said that's a.
I said that's a typical Christian interpretation by Christian scholars. But go ahead.
Christians,
Yeah, they spiritualize them.
right, they don't talk about it at all.
Right.
But he says you couldn't have a city and a structure like they're describing, not like it's described in this vision of Ezekiel. And therefore, John Gill says they're not talking, Ezekiel's not talking about an actual piece of land and a physical structure. He's talking about the spirit of
That's what
Yeah,
Ed
that's
was
my
saying.
case.
Yes.
coming.
Yeah, because you're both looking at Christian commentators. Right.
That's my case.
That's what Ed was saying earlier. But go ahead, finish your thought.
I guess I already.
No, you're right. And that's important to know.
That was Gil's opinion.
Can I ask
Yeah.
a question? Are there Jewish commentators that we can look online? I don't know the names of them.
There are Messianic Jewish commentators like Edersheim, and there's Franz Delitzsch online for free. Edersheim, Alfred Edersheim, and he wrote a huge commentary on the temple, which is really a commentary on the second temple. I don't remember how much he gets into anything on Ezekiel. There's millions of commentaries you can get. And really, when you say online, there's
There
free
is a
sources.
Delitzsch
I'm sorry.
There is a Delitzsch commentary online, yeah?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
What?
Studylight.org.
Bible.
Studylight.org. Okay, you go to commentaries and scroll all the way down because there's lots of Christian commentaries. But then when you get to, it's called Keil and Delitzsch. Keil is Keil, and that guy worked with Delitzsch. They worked together. Keil and Delitzsch. Delitzsch is a non-spelling. It's Deliepzch. There's a Z in there somewhere. Franz, his first name was Franz, Franz, and then it has a German last name, D-E-L, or D-I-L, I think I-E or E-I-P-Z-C-H. And that guy translated the New Testament into Hebrew.
Yeah, this is his translation.
That's his translation. In the 1800s, he did that. He wasn't the first guy. There was a Hebrew translation way back in the 1600s that was done in Hebrew. But Franz Delitzsch made a very good translation of the New Testament. And so he was a Messianic Jew. Okay, before.
No, I read that he wasn't, but yeah, but I don't know.
I mean, I think he was ordained, anyway. But,
That he wasn't Jewish originally.
Okay, I read that he was, but he could be wrong. He knew Hebrew really well.
Oh,
so,
yes. And Greek.
And Greek.
So you translated it from Greek?
Yeah, he took the Greek and he put it into Hebrew, the New Testament. And that's the translation we use here in Hebrew.
And is that the one, that's the one in the TLV then? That's the one?
No, the TLV is English. We're talking about
We're talking
Hebrew.
about the
Yeah.
Hebrew, the Greek to Hebrew.
Right,
Yeah.
so did the TLV derive it from this one? I guess that's what I was.
No, the
No,
TLV
they
went
put
from
it
Greek to
from
Hebrew,
Greek to Greek.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes
which is also good.
Right. Right.
But if you're looking for a Hebrew version of the New Testament, you want to find Franz Delitzsch.
Yeah.
Now, Franz Delitzsch also did a commentary on the whole Tanakh, the whole Old Testament.
Is that under study light?
That's studylight.org.
Is under
Keel
comment-
and Delitzsch. You'll
Okay.
find it. It's
Under
free.
commentaries.
And commentaries. I will say it's very linguistic. He goes more into the original language. And that's another method of interpretation. That would be more of a literal interpretation because you're getting into the actual what does the word mean. And that's where Delitzsch is an expert. Okay. Yes.
Studylight, STUDLYLIGHT.com.
.org.
Okay.
Studylight.org.
Okay.
All right, we are kind of running out of time here. Maybe one more question. Okay, number 8 asks an interesting question. Why are the porches, quote, all around, and why do they face each other? Why are the porches described as, quote, all around, and why do they also face each other? Now, I will give you a hint. There's a discrepancy between the word porch or porches and halls. Some translations call it a hall. Others call it a porch. I think the PLV calls it a porch. But the porch is connected to a hall. That's a hint. So why does it say they're all around, porches, halls, all around, and then they face each other? Why? Did anybody get into that? Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. We will start there next time.
All right.
Good idea.
You have time to do your homework.
I didn't.
Yeah.
Oh, you didn't have time. Oh, okay.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
About the upcoming class. I asked
Okay.
that to Barb
Yes.
yesterday. I actually got all the books online.
Good.
last night.
For you.
I
Good
know.
for you,
I
because
wasn't
they're hard to
going
find now.
You know what? If you go to Abe Books, ABEBOOKS.com, you can find good copies and have them shipped free, and it's far less than Amazon. So
Wow.
what I do is I go to Amazon, I check the titles, and I copy and paste it into Abe Books, and I put the author in, and I got everything for like, I think $21 or $24. So
Great.
that was
Great.
phenomenal.
Give that website to Barb because other people are calling. And if she knew that website, she could tell others.
I'll definitely give it to her.
Okay.
I can give it to her after service.
May 5th is a seminar. If you didn't know about it, we're starting a 10-week seminar on how to be a Messianic believer. And that's all about the ins and outs of Messianic Judaism. It's an excellent seminar. We use it as our kind of like our membership class. If you're looking to join, but you don't have to be wanting to join Tikva in order to take the class. It's free. There are some really good books out there that are kind of required reading for membership. And those books are on our website. And there is more information about the seminar on our website. So go to the website if you want to be a part of the seminar.
Another
Yes.
question.
Sure.
Would there be like a syllabus? Because I know I can't read all of them by next week. So
Yeah.
I
You
know
don't
it's gonna
need-
be over time.
You don't need to, yeah, it's over the whole time period. The books are required for membership. And so in order to be accepted as a member, you have to have read all 3 of those books. Not for the
There's
seminar.
4 of them.
Yeah, you're right. There's 4. We added 1. There used to be 3. Now there's 4. And the 4th one was by Eitan Shishkov called What About Me? Which is all a book about non-Jews. What about me? How do I fit into this? It's a very important book. So that's the 4th one we added.
Now, what's the third one? Because I just know a few that I
Don't
read.
Call Me Christian by
Oh.
Paul Lieberman.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I actually have that one. I didn't read it yet.
And
But I
the
got it
first
from the
2
conference.
is Born a Jew, Die a Jew
Yeah, I
by
read it.
Chernoff. And then the second one is Our Hands Are Stained with
By
Blood
Michael Brown.
by Dr. Michael Brown. You have to understand those 4 books. If you do not understand those 4 books, you're going to get confused in Messianic Judaism. You're going to get confused and upset because things aren't going to make sense. And eventually you're going to leave kind of angry because you don't get it. You don't get it. You didn't take time to read the books. You didn't take time to understand the whole 2,000-year history. Why do we do the things we do? Why do we interpret the Bible the way we do? Why is it so difficult in this ministry where you have Jews together with non-Jews and we all relate kind of differently? We have different kind of callings, and how do we relate to each other? And there's all these dynamics that are very, very confusing. It's not like a typical church, but you just go and join in the same, whether it's First Baptist Church down the road or some evangelical church down this road or some Pentecostal. You're getting almost virtually the same thing. Not in the Messianic synagogue. It's a whole different dynamic. And unless you take some time and study it, you're going to be confused most of the time you're here.
But the amazing thing is the foundation is so
Biblical.
rich. It's so rich. It's like, that's what I've been looking for like my whole life.
There you go.
To have that foundation.
Right.
It's
We're
like-
restoring an ancient foundation that existed in the first century when Jerusalem was the head of the church, not Rome.
Right.
And that's the difference.
Right. And
You go to a church, you're getting a Gentile
perspective.
perspective.
Right. And Jonathan Kahn was saying that it's like we're both missing each other.
Right.
You know.
Right. So, blessing after the Haftorah, and then it's Shabbat, and we're going to go worship the Lord in spirit and in truth. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, tzur kol haolamim, tzadik b'kol haderot, ha'el ha'ne'eman, ha'omer v'yoseh, hamdaber u'mkaim, shechol devarav emet v'tzedek. Ne'eman atahu Adonai Eloheinu, ne'emanim devarecha, devar echad midvarecha, achor lo yeshuv rekam. Ki el melech ne'eman v'rachaman atah, Baruch atah Adonai ha'el ha'ne'eman kol dvarav. And the English is, blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, rock of all ages, righteous throughout all generations. You are the faithful God, promising and then performing, speaking and then fulfilling. For all your words are true and righteous. Faithful are you, O Lord our God, faithful are your words, for no word of yours shall remain unfulfilled, for you are a faithful, merciful God and King. Blessed are you, O Lord, you are faithful in fulfilling your words. Amen. So start with question number 8 next week, and I'll add more questions to it this week. Okay?
It'll be on the same program.
Oh yeah, Ron. I should add that as a fifth one.
But it's really basic, and it's just the way it's said. It's very easy.
We could put it in
like a
place.
summary and
Yeah.
the rest.
I wanted to
I agree.
Yeah, he gave us that. He gave me a copy.
I know, but I bought mine.
You bought it.
I was really used now. I mean, it's been a while.
I know. I haven't had any time. People give me books, and I'm like,
But that's really the other guy.
oh, that's a good one. Yeah.
I didn't want to.
I was watching this video of his testimony.
But you know,
He was being interviewed in section.
I know, I watched
You saw that too?
Yeah, I know. Oh, yeah. It was such a delight. All those Hebrew words they
Yes, two Israelis.
It was a delight. Yes.
I love Yitzhak. He's a friend of mine.
But you know, I really see his style of work, you know, so I know he has a yeah.
Moran's a great guy.
I know, oh, he was wonderful when he's talking. Oh yeah.
I love all the Israelis.
So humble, so
Yeah. And Baruch is humble too.
Oh,
Very
yes,
humble.
very.
Very. We could all learn something. Amen.